Good evening and welcome to the Late Debate. Tonight, will the Mayor of London succeed in his bid to drive diesel vehicles off the streets? But first, that screeching U-turn as Chancellor Philip Hammond abandoned plans to increase national insurance payments from the self-employed.
I have decided not to proceed with the Class 4 NICS measures set out in the budget. There will be no increases in national insurance contribution rates in this Parliament.
If the Chancellor had spent less time writing stale jokes for his speech and the Prime Minister less time guffawing like a feeding seal on those benches, we would have not have been landed in this mess.
Didn't mince his words, did he? Earlier I spoke to the Shadow Chancellor and asked him whether that attack on the Prime Minister was over the top.
Well, I was angry. I was really angry because last week we had the Chancellor who spent more time on stale jokes in his speech, and then we saw the Prime Minister literally guffawing. And what was happening? What were they laughing at?
But it's inappropriate language, isn't it?
Inappropriate. It's parliamentary language. Can you remember the savage by a dead sheep and those sort of expressions? We saw a Prime Minister and a Chancellor guffawing and laughing at what? Cutting basically the incomes of middle and low earners. Unacceptable. That promise in the manifesto not to increase national insurance was quite clear. They broke that promise and then they loaded £2 billion on the self-employed. Do you know what the average self-employed wage is at the moment? £12,000 a year. These are people that actually are the engines of our economy. They don't want to be burdened like this. And then within 6 days, they reversed the decision because they've been forced by Labour MPs, Tory MPs and Federation of Small Business and Trade Unions to think again. It was a disastrous budget.
You claim Labour is responsible for the U-turn. Surely it was backbench Tory revolt, even ministerial Tory revolt. It was all of
us. I said in the chamber, I congratulated Jeremy Corbyn because he was the first to raise it when he responded to the budget. I congratulated Labour MPs who then piled in, but also I did say, and MPs across the House, but actually also the Federation of Small Businesses, very straight with the government about what the impact would be. Individual trade unions saying to the government, there's a lot of people out there now self-employed, often bogus self-employment, and this does nothing for them. A lot of civil society organisations saying as well, the government's got to think again.
Why was Jeremy Corbyn's response so lame? Even Labour MPs were withering.
It wasn't lame at all. He identified the issue and he drove it home. Then what happened? We piled in after that with all the detailed information. Remember, it's the toughest gig in Parliament responding to a budget. You get a copy of the speech half an hour before, but most of it is redacted. I've seen it. I've gone through this process twice now. He responded, he identified the issue. But what was interesting, when it was raised in the debate with the Chancellor, who pointed it out that this was a manifesto commitment you were breaking? Who? A BBC reporter. This is ridiculous.
Well, why not a Labour politician?
Well, it was. The first person to point it out was one of our backbenchers who got up and said, this is a manifesto commitment. Then the Chancellor said, actually, no, it was a BBC reporter. This is bizarre. Here we have a government in complete disarray. It doesn't know its own manifesto or it ignores its promises. It then introduces a policy, and this is not the first time. Can you remember last year was exactly the same? Within a week, they had to reverse their policy again. What I'm worried about is that this was meant to pay £2 billion for social care. Where's that money going to be found now? Will it be stealth taxes or will it be cuts? Or will social care not get that money? And that's why I was pressing the Chancellor in his statement to be clear.
Both the Chancellor and the Prime Minister have used a figure of £500 million when referring to your borrowing plans, Labour's borrowing plans. Is that accurate?
No, completely.
So what is the figure?
Well, what they've said is what I've announced, which is we want £500 billion over a 10-year programme of investment. Where have I got that figure from? The CBI, Confederation of British Industry, saying that's what our infrastructure needs. And I've said, how do we do that? £250 billion, yes, borrowed at low interest rates, main government department spending. Actually, that's very similar to what other governments have done in the past, including at times Labour governments and Conservative governments. Then £100 billion into the National Investment Bank we're establishing, which on European Investment Bank rates will lever in £250 billion worth of private sector money. That's a realistic programme. This is not something revolutionary or scientific. It's just what people are saying. We need to invest in our economy if we've got to compete with other countries.
How do you explain Labour's risible poll rating at the moment?
Well, it goes back a long way to 2007, 2008. Labour were in government when the crash happened, and we've not recovered since then. Actually, it's the same for every government that was in power at the time.
But 17 points behind?
Yes, but with regard to the issues around economic credibility and where are we economically credible, we haven't been that.
But you're suggesting you're not if you're that far
No,
behind
what I'm
in the
saying
polls.
is people don't have confidence in us, but that's the same with every social democratic or other political party in control during the crash itself. We've got to rebuild that. It takes time. In addition to that, of course, we've gone through 2 leadership elections in 22 months. During leadership elections, the party looks divided. What I'm saying, people won't vote for a divided party. Now we unite, set out our policies, and that's what we're doing. I'm doing conferences all around the country about our economic policies, and we will eventually raise in the polls. And it is contrasting us setting out a long-term vision for the country based upon sound economics and a government that can't even create a budget that lasts more than 6 days.
You're very close to Jeremy Corbyn. Do you think he will lead the party in 2020 into the general election?
He'll win it as well. He'll win it as well.
But 17 points behind?
Yes, people completely underestimate where we're going at the moment in terms of how we can convince people about the economic, well, our economic policies and how they can succeed and transform people's lives in this country.
But even some of your own backbenchers think you're living in cloud cuckoo land with that argument.
Oh, look, there's a small residual group, yes, of course, that haven't accepted yet Jeremy's leadership. But he's been elected twice now, in the second time with an increased mandate. The majority of the party, the vast majority of the party, the vast majority of the parliamentary Labour Party want to get on with the job of opposing the government, but more importantly, setting out the plans for the future based upon what people need.
So Labour's Achilles heel is not Jeremy Corbyn?
No, it's not at all. I think he's our strength. He's a new type of leader, but he's a decisive leader, but at the same time he's a consensual leader. He brings people together. And I think that's what we need. I've had enough. We saw it in the budget. I've had enough of people arrogantly coming to the House of Commons chamber, cracking jokes, introducing policies they haven't thought through, not listening to people, and then, well, falling apart within a week.
Would you still like to be leader one day?
No, I tried a couple of times. Jeremy's the leader now. I want to perform this role. I will never stand for the leader of the Labour Party again. Jeremy will be our leader. He'll take us into the next election. We'll win. And I hope he appoints me then as the Chancellor.
If you do become Chancellor of the Exchequer, what powers would you devolve to the Mayor of London?
Well, Sadiq Khan, I think, is doing a great job. He needs, as he's saying now, further financial power so that he can actually raise funds to invest in the long term. He needs a proper long-term deal with government. We can't have these deals that last 4 or 5 years. We need a decade-long deal, at least in terms of infrastructure spending. He's actually saying, I want to tackle the issue around employment and skills. And again, those areas, I think he needs the powers to be able to invest in those. Remember, I used to be the Chair of Finance on the old GLC. I was the Chancellor of the Exchequer for London. And during those days, we had the power to go to the City of London, borrow extremely cheap rates, and invest. And what did we do? Well, we built the Thames Barrier. We built infrastructure projects. We had a properly funded fire service. We had a transport infrastructure that was growing all the time.
Sadiq Khan has appointed Lord Mandelson to be one of his Brexit advisors. How do you feel about Peter Mandelson being back in power, influencing a Labour politician?
He's got the expertise that we need. Remember, he was a commissioner in Brussels.
You're happy about
Yes,
Mandelson
I am.
being...
Yeah, we want to pick his brain as well in terms of our own front bench as well. And the issues here is we need all the expertise coming together. Peter Mandelson was a commissioner, so he knows, I'll give you the example, he knows how to negotiate trade deals. And he's saying the fantasies that Liam Fox has about the trade deals that he can negotiate are unreal. What we need is people with experience, like Peter Mandelson and others, who bring this debate around Brexit into the real world.
John McDonnell praises Peter Mandelson. Who'd have thought it?
Well, I've done it before. I praised him about when he was Secretary of State and he introduced a scrappage scheme for cars, which actually regenerated our manufacturing base in terms of cars.
Now, it's not for nothing that London is known as the Big Smoke. Air pollution has plagued the capital for hundreds of years. It used to be coal fires which cause concern. Today, it's diesel engines. But ensuring Londoners stay healthy comes at a cost. London is being choked by a near-invisible toxic soup. 9,000 Londoners are said to die prematurely every year because of pollution. In October, anyone driving an old so-called dirty diesel in central London will be hit with a £10 toxicity charge. And from next January, Transport for London will refuse to licence any new diesel taxis.
We recognise, just like everybody else, that a major contributory factor is diesel vehicles. And we're happy to adopt a new range-extended electric vehicle from the end of the year. But the big issue for us and many commercial operators is there just isn't an infrastructure, a rapid charge infrastructure, ready to assist us.
The T-charge and clampdown on diesel taxis is only the start. In 2020, London will get a 24-hour ultra-low emission zone with even stricter rules. 20 boroughs will be affected, but the mayor needs the government's help. He wants taxpayers to bankroll a diesel scrappage scheme. Are you demonising diesel?
No, listen, I think it's really important to recognise that people were advised 10, 15 years ago to buy diesel. Why? Because petrol was creating carbon dioxide, huge problems in relation to greenhouse emissions. We can't penalise low-income families, charities and businesses. That's why we need a national diesel scrappage scheme to help these families.
For some Londoners, the demise of diesel is not a cause for celebration. At the Ford factory in Dagenham, where 3,000 workers make nothing but diesel engines, they hope diesel has a future.
I think diesel will continue to play an important part in the picture. I think it would be premature to say that diesel is dead. We continue to develop diesels and produce them in our engine factory in Dagenham.
In the coming weeks, the government will announce its plans for tackling air quality. London's mayor hopes ministers will finally approve that diesel scrappage scheme. Now to discuss that, I'm joined by a panel of capital politicians. For Labour, Ruth Cadbury. For the Conservatives, Mark Field. And for the Green Party, co-leader Jonathan Bartley. Mark, can I come to you first of all? Sadiq Khan has so far failed to make the case for a diesel scrappage scheme with the government. Are ministers listening with a sympathetic ear?
I hope they are, and I think it's a little unfair to say he's failed to make the case. He's made it pretty robustly, and I think
he hasn't convinced them yet. It didn't appear in the budget.
Well, I think the issue, obviously, to do as ever, will be precisely what money, precisely how that scrappage scheme works. I think he makes a fair point, which is that only 10, 15 years ago, the environmentally friendly thing to do was to say, let's go headlong down this route towards diesel, and therefore there are people who clearly need to be compensated for taking what they thought to be the right decision. But it's very clear to me that NO2 and NOx fumes is now a much bigger issue than carbon dioxide here in London. And I think credit where credit is due. I think we could have had mayors just sitting on their hands, letting things go for another 3 or 4 years before doing anything. I'm glad that he's trying to do something. Listen, it's going to be difficult. There isn't a lot of money around, as we know, to get a scrappage scheme that is going to be agreeable to everyone, but I hope that we can make some progress on this.
But the colossal cost of air pollution, I mean, not just in human life, which is bad enough, 9,000 deaths a year in London associated with air pollution, 40,000 up and down the UK, but the £20 billion cost annually, estimated by the Royal College of Physicians, in terms of health. So you're actually going to be making savings when you take these steps. And we can't be complacent about this. I mean, we've still got a mayor who's going to expand City Airport, for example, and all the pollution that's going to put into Newham. It isn't just about diesel. Yes, we need diesel scrappage scheme, but we also need vehicle excise duty increased on new diesel cars. We've got to discourage these new diesel cars coming onto the market, and we need a transition for the makers of the diesel cars so they don't lose their jobs.
Ruth, you've got the M4 going through your constituency. Your constituents live under the Heathrow flight path. How bad are things?
Well, it's really polluted now, and if Heathrow runway 3 does go ahead, it'll be a lot worse. But we don't just need a vehicle scrappage scheme. We need the government to take this issue seriously, both for London but nationally as well. We need a new Clean Air Act, and we need a range of measures. And Sadiq Khan is doing the right thing, but he really needs the support of government, and he's not getting that right now. Not sufficiently.
Well, no, it will take time. And listen, in fairness, people like me have been banging on about NOx fumes for many years now. It's been clearly here in central London. It's been a problem that we faced around Knightsbridge, on the Marylebone Road, and on the Euston Road as well. It's particularly acute. Listen, we've got to try and get a scheme right, and part of the difficulty is, as we know, every time you start putting an elastoplast on this, when we first of all incentivise diesel, who knows where we're going to be in 5 or 10 years' time.
So can I just challenge two politicians here? You don't support the expansion of City Airport, then presumably, if you're taking this seriously.
Well, we need more. We will need more airport capacity.
I mean, we've got to make decisions, and here we have a classic case.
We know if we didn't make economic decisions, and not just environmental decisions
you're
alone.
prioritising the economy over people's lives.
No, we've got to try and find a balance. You're prioritising the environmental issues as if nothing else mattered.
If this was 9,000 road accidents a year in London, you wouldn't be saying that.
Well, if the logic of that is you outlaw the car, because no.
You recognise that it was an emergency, a national emergency, and you
have to recognise that there is a balance on these things. And you talk about a Clean Air Act. Let's be honest. I mean, compared to where we were 60 years ago, and I'm not saying we should go back 6 decades, but there have been improvements. There will and must be more improvements going forward, but we need to try and get a balance.
Ruth, can I ask you? Are you encouraged to hear at least one Conservative politician apparently singing the praises of Sadiq Khan on this issue?
Well, Mark often disagrees with his government.
Well, I'm not disagreeing with the government, but all I'm saying is I think Sadiq's right. I think, to be fair, Ruth, all I'm saying is I think Sadiq is absolutely right to raise this on behalf of all Londoners, and I think there is an urgent need to do something. I wouldn't disagree with what Jonathan said, particularly in relation to NOx, which I think has been regarded as the Cinderella area of
it's important to note that we've been banging on about this with respect a lot longer than Mark as the Green Party, and we pushed it up and up and up the agenda with our London Assembly members since the year 2000. And I think in 10 years' time we'll be looking back and saying, why did we not take more action around, for example, City Airport, around Heathrow, and take this issue absolutely seriously? And it isn't, a kind of, do we help the economy or do we not help the economy? If you're spending £20 billion treating people in the health service, you're going to actually address excess costs.
But you two have both lost the argument on Heathrow, haven't you? Heathrow's going to go ahead.
No, well, it's got an awful lot of hurdles to overcome. It's got to the government's got to address the EU air quality legislation. We're in breach now in West London of the air quality standards, and there's no way you can expand the Heathrow and the traffic that's going to go there without further breaching EU air quality standards. I mean, the government has lost EU. European court cases and the High Court case, and the government is on notice to sort itself out legally, but on behalf of Londoners who are having to breathe this appalling air. And if they don't take serious action soon, not only on stopping Heathrow, but on scrappage scheme, on a proper supporting an effective ultra-low emission zone in London, and all these other factors, if they don't take action soon, the death rate's just going to go up. And we have a real crisis here, but it's not just a crisis of whether we're using diesel or petrol engines, it's also a crisis of congestion. And until we start looking at encouraging other forms of transport that are cheaper and healthier,
where are we going to get that money to invest in a decent public transport?
Is it time to be radical and say the era of the private car in London is over?
I think
it's
been over for a while, and we're just catching up to that fact. And we have to invest. We are a growing capital. We have a lot of people. We need that decent public transport infrastructure. If you're a train
no mainstream party is going to put that in their manifesto, though, are they?
I mean, my constituency is in suburban London, and many people could walk more, cycle more, use public transport more than they do. And everybody making each decision they make, whether or not they own a car, could they use it less? But the reality is we still don't have an adequate joined up system in a lot of out of London, and it is still quite costly to use public transport, particularly if you're on a low income.
Mark, the government has promised to deliver its plan for air quality in the next few weeks by April the 24th. Can we expect something radical?
I certainly hope we're going to get something that, it won't keep everyone happy, but I hope that we'll make a strong step in the right direction. And I think, what I would say, about the issue of public transport here in London, we have, it is a global city, let's be honest, but we have the most sophisticated public transport system. I accept, it's easy perhaps for me to say in the middle of Zone 1, but even in the outer zones with buses and the like. But people still want to have the freedom of being able to utilise a motor car, and getting them off the road is not a good idea.
Off limits to disabled people, and there's one in 6 Londoners has some kind of disability. Yet the whole, a lot of the tube system is supposed to be a public transport system. It's not public. It's a system of transport apartheid.
But I
wait with my son, to get on a bus.
Compared to 15 or 20 years ago, and I accept that, we need to make more progress, much more progress. But you only need to look at a tube map and look how good it is for disabled people compared to, say,
my son is a wheelchair user. He's 14 years old, and he's never been on a tube train in his life. We can't use Streatham Station, which is our new station, because he's never had a lift put in. This would only cost £100,000 to open up that station to disabled people in the local community. There is so much more we can do. Unfortunately, under the previous Mayor of London, we saw big cuts to what should have been gone. We've seen cuts from central government and the Access for All programme, so that the signals are not coming from central government. When we had the Paralympics, suddenly all these ramps appeared everywhere, if you noticed. Suddenly it became an accessible city. The Paralympics disappeared, and so did the accessibility. If we have the political will, we can make that public transport system what it needs to be.
We lost a number of proposals to install lifts in a number of our tube stations. stations on the Piccadilly line out our way, and they've been cancelled. And the other thing we're waiting for from government that there's been ongoing delays for is a cycling and walking investment strategy, which...
Well, the Mayor's got a new cycling and walking commissioner. Surely he can come up with something.
He has, and admittedly there is more investment in London on cycling and walking than there is in other parts of the UK. But, you know, London is the UK's global city, and it is slipping down the international quality of life rankings, partly because of air pollution and partly because of the cost of public transport.
I must confess, you know, I'm Vice Chairman for International Affairs for the Tory Party, and I go to a lot of capital cities, and one thing I always come back with, you think, gosh, London is a pretty clean city, and again, we can't be complacent about it, but again, we've made some fantastic strides over the last decade. No, you can't. But
Jonathan, do you give any credit?
Graffiti and the like.
Do you give any credit to the last Mayor, Boris Johnson, for what he did for cycling?
I think he was certainly, it was a lot of pressure from, you know, externally that made him go in the right direction. He got on his bike, we saw him cycling around. Now we're getting segregated lanes. I think we've seen actually a step in the right direction to give Sadiq a bit of credit over, certainly where I am on the A23 in Streatham. It was this kind of pay homage to vehicle flow, to traffic flow. Everything was based around getting those cars moving as fast as possible. I think we're seeing a slightly different direction from Sadiq Khan, where we're seeing extension to crossing times, which is helping older people. We're seeing safety given greater priority. And I think we're going to see more, you know, steps in the right direction over cycling. But I mean, this is not about one mayor. This is about the direction of travel, if you excuse the pun, you know, from external pressure, which has come from London Assembly members like, you know, our ones that have been there since 2000.
Who do we take our hats off to the fact that we're actually having a conversation about this issue now?
I think, you know, for all the fiery debate that we've had here tonight, actually there's a lot that we broadly agree on. I mean, not quite the speed that Jonathan would like. There'll be differences of emphasis, but I think broadly the way that London has operated since we've had the mayoralty over the last sort of 17 years, there has been, you know, an improvement in public transport. There have been obviously improvements in cycling lanes. I think there is a broader London consensus, and I accept that, of course, there are differences at the margins, but this is a very different city to the one that I first became a representative for 16 years ago.
Yes, but it's a far more, there's a far bigger population than there was. I mean, in the 30 or 40 years I've been here, and you know, the government needs to support London in investing to support that population.
I have to stop you there. It's getting very late. Time to go home, I'm afraid. Thank you all very much for coming in. We'll be back with the late debate next month for another edition, but for the moment, thank you very much for watching. Good night.